know we spoke, geez, I guess that was probably a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years ago, Anton. And I highly recommend everyone to visit that interview either before or definitely right after you're watching this one. There's so much value in that conversation. I hope that this one will be an extension of that, and we'll just be able to kind of expand on a lot of the concepts that we dug into in that episode. I also think we've both evolved a lot since we last spoke. Anton, you've put out a new book since that time, and maybe that would be a good place to kind of start, man. I know you've done quite a bit of press and promo around the book. First off, kudos to you. But just kind of talk a little bit about, I guess, the origin to what made you want to become an author in the first place, and what led to CEO² for you.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I never thought this was going to be my first type of book. Like, I never would have guessed in a million years I would have wrote about business and the type of content and the way I delivered it.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why. I just wouldn't have thought that was the path, I guess, for my first book. But what I realized in writing it was that the reason I wrote it and the speed at which I wrote it truly came out of like frustration. And the frustration was twofold. Number one was that throughout my career, and when I say career, like the past 11 years of being an entrepreneur, I have seen so many incredibly skilled individuals not build a business to the financial capability it could have had, and or not even make it in business because they just suck at being a business owner. And that kind of makes me upset. And a lot of my clients in my social media company and building that up over the past 7 years, I saw the same thing where a lot of these entrepreneurs, they have like a very good skill. They're changing the world. They're changing people's lives. They're changing people's businesses with what they do, but yet they suck at the financial side of things. And that always kind of pissed me off because it felt like those people out of anybody should be the ones with the most abundance, but usually they have the least because they don't know how to run a business and they get taken advantage of. Quite frankly, a lot of them do.
Yeah.
So that was part one of this, the fuel. Part two was that in my background of being a part of so many spiritual based communities, I have seen that there are so many people that really have the wrong idea of what it means to create real success. And the biggest people who talk about things like the law of attraction and manifesting, not to say those aren't real, but they put all of the emphasis in that, and it puts them in a delusional road. And
Yes.
I have found a lot of my friends on that road don't really end up anywhere. Like, they're all in the same spot they were 5 years ago. And that says something. So you can't dispute hard work. I believe in, success compounding really quickly once you kind of figure it out. And of course you need to work on your energy, but there's more to the equation than that. And this book for me was very much a demystifying of what it takes to build a real business. So, it was really out of like this frustration of like people need this so badly because they're so misled, or they just don't know how to run a freaking business. And I'm going to show them how to run a business.
And I think something that kind of separates your story from others as well is the fact that you've done it, man. You made your first million, I believe, at 24, if I'm not mistaken. 25, and you built a thriving social media company and have done amazing things off the back of that since. And I just, that's really important too, to have that evidence, to have that proof to fall back on and share from a place of congruence in the way that you have. And I want to take it back to something that you wrote about in the beginning of the book, when you kind of allude to the different types of entrepreneurs, right? And I want to ask you to talk about that, but specifically for you as an artist, maybe not having the skills in the way of finance and or operations and other types of the business that are required in order to scale. When did you first realize you needed to skill stack upon your artistic, creative, and strategic abilities? And then how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a really great question to just answer what the three types of entrepreneurs are, so people have context.
Yes.
In the book, I talk about there's three types of entrepreneurs. Everybody listening right now, you're likely the first type, which is the artist. Not in all cases, but it's likely that you're the artist. And the artist is simply the person who has a very specific skill. They don't need to be a painter. They can literally be a video editor. They could be a podcaster. They could be a chiropractor. They could be a dentist. Like, just a person who's highly skilled at one specific thing that they've turned into a business. They sell this skill per se, or this service or this product that they invented to somebody else, and that's what gives them their business. So that's the artist. That's the first type. The second type is the operator slash integrator. Now, this person's very technical in their thinking. They're very system oriented. They're very good at taking the art of the artist and scaling it in a way because they can build systems around the art. And this is a crucial person, which I'll talk about in a second. Then the third person is the pure type of entrepreneur. These are the people who will get into an industry just because they want to make money. Like right now, all the pure entrepreneurs are going into, AI, they're going into crypto, they're going into software because they're seeing, oh, there's this huge boom in these industries right now. I'm going to go into them, dig my roots in, and then in the next 4 or 5, 10 years, I'm going to sell it for a multiple, and that's going to be my ticket. And that's how they think. A lot of them are money driven, but they are also massive visionaries. A really good example of somebody who was a good blend of these is Steve Jobs. He was an artist, obviously, built computers, genius, but he was also really good at recruiting for his vision. So pure entrepreneurs, that third type, are really good at recruiting. So Steve Jobs, he recruited the CEO of Pepsi, and he has this famous quote that he says, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? And he said that to John Scully. Yes. Well, John Scully, when he got hired into Apple, the company went from I think 800 million in revenue to 8 billion in less than a decade, which is like a monster jump, especially in those times. Billions of dollars was different than billions of dollars today. And Jobs was able to understand that, okay, he's a really bad CEO, but he's a really incredible artist. And because he's a really incredible artist and he had that pure entrepreneur kind of hunger and desire to change the world, he recruited the best. And those same people that he recruited built the systems for his art. And this is what allowed Apple to literally become a multi-trillion-dollar company. So I just want to give that context so people know the three entrepreneurs. And to go back to your question of how I arrived at the point of realizing that I can't do this alone, was that I was pretty much just burning out, man. I was working 15-hour days, 12, 15-hour days every single day, including the weekends. It was taking a toll on my health. It was taking a toll on my relationship. And I knew something needed to change. So I just started seeking out different outside voices, reading different books, and realizing, there's something about my business that's missing, and I cannot do it by myself anymore. Like artists tend to be a little arrogant at times just because they believe that the biggest reason the business is going to succeed is because of the art. And there is an ounce of truth in that, but the business won't actually succeed long-term if you don't get that integrator slash operator, that person that can come in and refine your systems, the person that can come in and manage people more effectively, the person that can come in and take your art and make you realize, look, this is trainable, this is duplicatable, and artists can have a lot of limiting beliefs. And I had that. I owned a social media, or I owned and own still a social media company. So I was under the belief, well, I'm the best video editor, I'm the best content creator, I'm the best at growing pages, I understand this better than anybody. So because of that lens, I could never hire properly because people would come in, I'd hire video editors, they'd do the work, I wouldn't be satisfied with it, and I'd spend time either critiquing them so hard, I'd be like, I'll just do it. If you're saying I'll just do it, you are not a business owner, you are a business operator. You're stuck in your business. And after saying that for so long and burning out, I realized, holy shit, I need somebody new. And it all started, like there was a very defining moment of my business where I was having a conversation with one of my buddies who's a pure entrepreneur, so that kind of money-driven visionary. And, pure entrepreneurs tend to not really get very emotionally involved in businesses. Like it's all very logical to them. They see it as a numbers game. They're very unattached. So they're very effective because they don't make emotional-based decisions. So I was having a conversation with my buddy, and he's much older than me. He's probably 60 now. And he's a pure entrepreneur, probably doing at that time, maybe 5 million across a couple different businesses. So at that time in my life, he was much further along than I was. And we were having this conversation, and he was like, kind of giving me some feedback because I was complaining about how I can't hire, nobody's competent. And I was just being a little bitch, to be honest. And he kind of put me in my place. And after having this long discussion with him, I had like this aha moment. And I was like, this guy knows more than me about business.
Right.
He might not know more than me about social media, but he knows more than me about business. So I should listen to him. So I started talking to him and getting deeper into the conversation. And I just had this like download or this light bulb moment of like, yo, why don't you hire for me? Like I suck at running my business. I think if you came into my business and ran it, you'd do better than me. And so long story short, we made a job description. I gave it to him. He changed the whole thing. And then we put it out there, and he vetted who we interviewed. I didn't even interview them. He interviewed them, and I trusted him. I told him what I needed, and I trusted him to not only get the right skills, but get the right type of personality. And that was huge, because once that happened, those 2 hires led me to finding my operations person, because one of them that we hired, they were very operational in their thinking. They were like 50-50 between artists and operations. And at the time, I had all artists. So it was like nobody was system thinking. Well, this girl, she was like rock solid in my mind at that time with the systems. And then I started putting the pieces together, and I was like, oh shit, I need somebody to run the operations. So that's kind of like a long answer to the short question, but that's how it all unfolded.
One more point on this artist persona, because I know I'm at least 50% artist. I know you're a thoroughbred artist as well, and I'm sure the majority.
Yeah, I'm way up there, probably like 70%. I probably used to say I had 95%, but you grow in time, so I exercise different muscles now.
Should artists focus on upskilling themselves to a minimally viable threshold of operator integrator once they realize that skill deficiency, or as soon as they recognize where they need that help in the operational aspect, should they go out and seek it in somebody who is an expert in doing that?
Absolutely. So it depends on the stage of the business. Some artists, if they're, making 100 grand a year, they might not be able to afford a good operations person, or maybe less, maybe 70 grand a year. They might not be able to afford that person yet. So the problem with an artist trying to be an integrator / operator is they're going to build systems like an artist would. They're not going to be the most effective, but they could get you by. But eventually you're going to have to get to a point where you have to hire, and you may even be at a point where you lose money to bring that person on board. But there can be there can be integrators / operators that don't identify that as that, but it's actually the way they think. Like their actual thinking process is very much like it. Like you could get an intern like that, and they could look at all of this, your art, and see how it could become systematizable. But again, that's going to be very crucial in the hire and the way you put out the job description. So when I coach entrepreneurs, I always recommend, hey, take the quote hit, even if you have to give away a part of your business to a skilled integrator / operator. I would do it every day of the week, because that person's going to help you make so much more money and become so much more free.
And feel more invested in the project if they own a piece of it as well.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I 100% recommend.
You alluded to a couple of minutes ago just the fact that this whole journey has been such an immersive process for you. It's required, I know, all of your attention and all of your energy. And you even mentioned the way that it's affected your personal life and some of your relationships. I do want to ask a bit of a personal question around that, because I know this is something that a lot of creators and young entrepreneurs struggle with, right? Especially in this hustle culture that we're in. How do you, or how have you managed that kind of juxtaposition between knowing how much time, energy, effort, attention to give toward your hustle versus carving out and making time for the people that you care about and your family? And what have you learned about relationships throughout this entire journey?
Great question. So much, man. There's a lot of folds to this answer, but I'll start with this. When I was, quote, on my come up, where I didn't own my business, but my business owned me, I truly had no time. I thought I had no time for a relationship. So even if I was, quote, on a date or with my partner, I wasn't present with her. Because in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about my business. I'm always thinking about some fire. I'm always thinking about some client. I'm always thinking about, holy shit, there's more work to do. And she's just trying to have dinner with me. And although I'm sitting there with her, I was very rarely present. And that took a serious toll on the relationship. And, it was very painful, because something I loved, had to come to an end because of certain circumstances. And a lot of it was my fault. And that breaks my heart even to say that out loud. But that also has been part of the fuel why I wrote the book as well, because I was that struggling artist. Even though financially I was okay, it's not okay to be good financially and broke everywhere else. Like, that's a big problem. And I had that problem. I was broken in my health. I was broken in my relationships. Even my spirituality struggled, because I just felt like I didn't have time, because I was always stressed because my business ran me. So as I grew as an entrepreneur, now I'm in a space where I could go a month without touching my business, without even thinking about it, and I'm going to make just as much money. And that's literally what the book is designed to teach people how to do, is go from operator to owner. Because when you own the business, you don't work in the business. I don't make content. I haven't made content in years, but it's a social media agency. But I have a team that does it all. So I don't even manage my team. I have managers. I lead my team. I lead my managers. I lead the organization. But if I don't show up on a meeting, nothing, it's like no big deal. A lot of the times my team actually recommends me not to show up because I'm still the artist and they have a system in place and I fuck up the whole system. So they tell me to back off. So, you know, it's a hard pill for entrepreneurs to take, but in the beginning, there is going to be a bit of unbalance. And that's just the nature of the beast. That's the game you're getting into. And you have to understand that, because 5 to even 10 years of real investment, and where you're not just working hard, you're also working smart. You're taking in different processes like my book, which is literally designed to help shortcut your process. You're not trying to do it all by yourself. That will get you ahead for life, man. 5 to 10 years investment, you will be able to live a life most people can't even dream of. And I know that to be true because I've done it. I've helped countless other people do it. And business isn't really magic, right? It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's like whatever you put in is truly what you're going to get out. So I tell entrepreneurs, look, there will be a time where you have to have that conversation with your spouse or your loved one. Like, look, this is a period of the come up, that takes a lot of investment. But at the same time, you have to also remember, as a human being, you cannot put aside the people you love just for your career. Like, I know I'm saying go all in, go all in, go on, but you should have the capacity as a sovereign individual to say, you know what, I'm going to grind 6 days a week or 6.5. But on that half day, I'm with my partner and I'm truly with them. And if you're a guy, to women, that means the world. They would rather have 5 minutes of presence, like true, genuine, grounded presence. You're there with them, than like 3 weeks of like sporadic attention where you're not really there with them. So we have to do our part to not be victims to any circumstances and work with what we got while being realistic.
And I want to maybe take it back, to the humble beginnings of the agency, for you being your first real big successful business venture. And you talk about this story in the book, kind of the 180-degree twist that your life took from 17 to 22 years old, and the journey that you went on through that to ultimately building this company that did, I believe, 350K in revenue in your first year, which is just like mind blowing to me, and I'm sure to so many people. But talk about how you got started in building the agency, because I don't think that's a topic that we discussed in our first conversation, but one that is so interesting and important for so many people just looking to get something off the ground. Like, where do I start? So talk a little bit about that process and what led you to being able to scale that business.
Yeah, 100%. So on paper, you see, the business did $350,000 in the first year, $1 million plus in the second year. Oh my God, like overnight success. But the reality is that I was working for a small company for a couple years. I think, let's see, from like 2 years, I worked with this small company. It was a social media agency. So I literally didn't know anything when I started working with these guys. I was like, literally, like, I was doing customer service emails. Like, I just wanted to be a part of it because they were working with people like Bob Proctor and other spiritual leaders. And these were people I looked up to. And I said, at that time of my life, I was fucking dead broke. I was living at my grandma's, sharing a bedroom with my own mom. I was 21 years old. And it just wasn't the picture I thought I'd have at that age. Like, I thought by then I'd be way further than I was. I thought I'd for sure at least be making 10 grand a month at that time, but I wasn't. And the reality was I wasn't really making anything. And I knew I had to get around other people who were further along on the path than I was. And I also needed to be around positive information because I was so fucking negative, and I just knew I needed to be immersed in it. So one of my good buddies, now one of my good buddies, but back then he was more of an acquaintance. I just reached out to him. I said, look, dude, I'll work for your company for free. So that's exactly what I did while I was like literally living with my grandma and my mom. I worked for his company for free while I worked at a part-time job, making $11 an hour, just doing basic, like running a front desk of a float center. It was very basic.
Was this role online? Was this a virtual project?
So the small business was the social media agency was all online, but the $11 an hour kind of front desk job was a physical business in Michigan.
Got it.
And while I was on that job, all I did day in and day out, man, while I was making $11 an hour, doing the customer service, every spare minute, I was gaining skills. And the skills I was drawn to was video editing. I looked at the small social media business, and I've always been like street smart, I guess I'd say. And I saw there was a lot of holes, and I saw it as an opportunity because I saw these owners who didn't always have their priorities in the right like perspective. And I don't know if it was because they were a little bit so far and I was like so deep into the business so I could see things they couldn't. But there was something intuitive in me that was like, go into video editing. It's a useful skill. You'll always be able to use it. So literally, dude, every spare freaking minute I was YouTubing how to, edit. And then I pulled up, I downloaded Premiere and I started like playing with these things. And long story short, very quickly, because I was so hungry and I was just like willing to do whatever it takes, within a month of that process, I started editing videos for the company. I was just making videos, like social media videos, and it was like so valuable. Now, that wasn't like a job position beforehand, but I was paving my own lane and no one was telling me to do this. I was just doing it. And again, I wasn't getting paid. So I was like, they didn't give a shit. It was just like value add, value add, value add. And I kept doing this in multiple different compartments. And long story short, after, maybe I think it was like 8 months of this, there was an opportunity that arrived for the company. And when the company looked at all their employees and they said, who do we bring to this opportunity? The answer was easy. We're going to bring Anton because he's been working his ass off. He hasn't asked for $1 and he's clearly committed to this mission. And next thing you know, man, I was moving to LA to work on a project with the biggest influencer, quite literally, in the whole world. And I was 21 years old or 22. And it was just like, what is going on? Like night and day, my life changed. And, that came with an increase in finances as well. I ended up getting a salary with that business. They were paying me $2,000 a month, and doesn't sound like a lot, but at that time, man, that was very significant because I quite literally didn't really have much. I was making $11 an hour, and to get a salary, making videos and doing social media, like, dude, that was like a dream come true, man. It wasn't even about the money. It was just the opportunity. And one thing led to another. And I ended up starting my own agency a few years later with those skills that I learned in that like 3-4 years working with that company.
What you talk a lot about in the book, as well as like, this wasn't an accident. This didn't just happen by chance. You, for a lack of a better term, you manifested this through a process of planning and visualization and intention setting, like to
100%.
The details. And
when I was in my grandma's basement, there was I talk about this in the book, how I went from, when I moved into my grandma's, there was nowhere for me to sleep because my parents went through a divorce and my mom moved in with her mom, my grandma, and so did my brother. So there was nowhere for me to sleep other than share a bed with my mom. After doing that for many months, I eventually couldn't handle it anymore. Just like my self-esteem couldn't take it. So I migrated to the basement, and my grandma's basement is not finished. It's not like a nice basement. It was like, it's a mess, dude. Still is till this day. And I had this little cot. I actually have a picture of it. And one day I was just like so frustrated. I was just like, something's got to change. And I had two of these really defining moments. I'll tell you about the second one, where I just drew a line in the sand and I actually pulled out a video camera and I started filming how my life was about to change. Keep in mind, I had nothing. I'm living at my grandma's, 21 years old, like nothing, zero, man. And I'm just like commanding that this doesn't define me. I pretty much laid out my plan. And my plan was this. It was work as hard as I possibly can, but not just on my skills, also on my mind.
Right.
And I was just like talking about how I know the principles of success. Like I was like, I know the principles. I may not have the results, but I know the principles. I just truthfully haven't been applying them. Like I got really honest with myself. And I was like, I haven't been doing, working on my mindset. I haven't been trying to be an optimist or work on my attitude. I haven't been going as hard as I could on my skills. I haven't been trying to increase, the capacity of my friend group and associate with greater minds. Yeah. And I just got so freaking honest with myself, dude. And then I also claimed, I was like, this will not be how it ends. I will be making $10,000 a month. I will be living in, like, dude, I didn't even know this opportunity to move to LA was on the radar. And I literally said, I will live in Los Angeles. Like, I will be a part of a mission and impact that does good work. And dude, I just literally commanded it, bro. And there was like a shift in me that day. And, call it coincidence, call it manifesting. I don't know what, but months later, man, I was on my way to LA, and life truly changed from that moment. Now, yes, that stands out, but I also want to make it very clear. I was also working like a freaking dog. Like, I didn't, the owners of that company didn't just say, "Oh, let's select Anton." It was like, no, it was an easy decision for them because I was working harder than everyone else and asking for the least. I was just adding value, adding value, adding value. And I think if, like, you know, entrepreneurs, not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur. For me, entrepreneurship's in my blood, but sometimes a better way is to partner with a small business, man, where there's opportunity. And at this time of my life, I wouldn't really say I was much of an entrepreneur. It was in my nature to be one, but at that time, I was just a top employee. And that was enough to give me the space to eventually start my own business, which went on to change my entire freaking life.
Surrounding yourself with success. And there's so many different dimensions that you can look at to do that, right? What you talked about, like mindset, the company that you keep around you, what you're working on, how you're working, how you're living, you know, mental, emotional, physical wellness. All of these are entry points to start to just surround yourself and put those pieces together of what success would look like if you were maximizing your potential. And one thing I've always loved about you and your page is like, you'll post pictures of amazing people that you meet at conferences, or I know you like to network and you like to surround yourself by those resources of expertise and of success. And that it's like those are little access points that enable you to open up avenues that you may have never even imagined before. And there's things that can come from that we never envisioned, but it's like we have to take the step to do that.
100,000,000%. I think the biggest investment you ever have to make is in yourself. When I was 17 years old, I had a bit of success and I lost it all. And if you read the book, you'll read about that. But when I was 17, there was an opportunity to go see Bob Proctor speak in Vegas. Now, I was making like maybe $1,200 to $1,500 a month. It wasn't anything crazy. But I remember there was this opportunity and the ticket to go see him was like $800. But then you had to pay for a flight. You know, I was in Michigan, so flight to Vegas. Then you had to pay for a hotel, and it wasn't like some dinky hotel. It was a nice hotel. I think it was Bellagio. Like, it was an expensive place for relative, but at that time, very expensive for me. And I remember I used every dollar in my bank account to go to the seminar. Now, this isn't financial advice, but when I went there and I saw Bob speak, something in me changed that day because I saw at such a young age, I was so impressionable because I was just an open kind of vessel. And I just couldn't believe the abilities Bob Proctor had and his power, although he was so old, but he had this youth about him. And I was just like, I'm going to do that one day. And that was, I couldn't tell you what he taught. I couldn't tell you what I learned, but I can tell you what I remembered, how I felt. And that impression went so far, dude. I believe that moment molded my destiny. Like, truly, that one little moment, because I saw an example of what I aspired to be like without even knowing. And I think that's kind of how destiny works in a weird way. It's like you see other people maybe doing a flavor of what you're doing, and you just know in your heart of hearts, like, that's what I'm here to do. And we need to constantly invest in ourselves because those seminars and that industry, that personal growth industry, it's the greatest in the world. If you can find a good teacher, like, you might spend $10,000 on a seminar, or $5,000 or $1,000. You might only learn one thing, but that one thing can change your whole business. That one thing can change your whole life. I actually calculated it last year. I've invested over 7 figures of my own money into seminars over the course of my life. Wow. Travel, getting there, tickets. I mean, I did a Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership. That alone was $125,000. And these things change your whole life. Now, I didn't start at that $125,000 program. I started with the Bob Proctor $800 programs. I started with the virtual seminars for $1,000 or $2,000. I started with the course that was going to grow my skill or my mindset. And dude, everyone always asks me, like, Anton, what are you investing in? I tell them, like, you shouldn't be investing in anything until you're making at least $1 million. So the way you're going to get to $1 million is by investing in yourself. It's not going to be Bitcoin. It's not going to be stocks. It's not going to be real estate. And I believe in investing, but I think in the beginning, you have to not diversify so hard into other things, and you got to invest in you, like 100% in you. And like, dude, I cannot tell you the amount of business I've done, like actual business deals with people I've met at seminars, the amount of friendships I've created, the tips I've gotten. Like, dude, my business would not be where it is without paying to be in rooms with people who are playing the game at a higher level than me. And so many people are so ignorant and arrogant to want to do that because they're scarcity minded. But I'm like, yo, like when I invested in Platinum Partnership with Tony, it was like, that wasn't easy. That was never an easy moment. I didn't even own a house back then. That was a down payment on a freaking house. And yet there was something in me that was like, I got to, like, I don't know what it is. And dude, that made me so much more money. I can't even quantify it because it's so big.
I want to shift the course of this conversation. We're about halfway through here, and we're both at a somewhat similar position in that we're sort of in the wake of coming out of somewhat recent relationships, and I know that a lot of what you've been digging into and posting lately centers around the alchemization process between the masculine and the feminine, and for men and both women, but also really exploring what modern masculinity means and what makes us who we really are as men, and for women as well. I want to ask you, man, coming out of, I guess, that most recent experience, but also just as you've evolved as a human and as a man, what have you learned about masculinity for you that maybe you didn't know when you were just a young kid, and how is that shaping the way that you relate to and enter into the world today?
I think a lot of men have a very poor example of what masculinity is,
Yeah,
especially in our culture.
yeah,
And I think the issue is multifold. Number one, you have fathers who maybe did actually a good job, but the mother doesn't think that. So the moms instill a poor kind of frame or perspective of the father to the sons, and that makes sons resent their dad and say, I'm never going to be like him. Yet they're not realizing that what their mother is sharing is the lens of a mother, not the lens of another man. Now, are all dads perfect? Was my father perfect? No, nobody's perfect.
right.
But my dad, for me, did a really damn good job. And a lot of people try to paint him in a lot of negative lights who also happen to be women. Now, that's one end of the equation. The second end of the equation is a lot of men are actually just weak. And because they're weak, they're not able to pass on the true kind of initiations, I'll say, to their sons
Hmm.
because they've lost their own center. They don't own who they are. So the wife or the moms kind of run the show, and there's no kind of divine fatherly energy in the household. So they're getting really poor examples of what masculinity is.
Right,
So for me, my skewed understanding of masculinity was that it was some soft, gentle, nice guy thing.
right. Me too.
Now, and that's a lot of guys. And this can happen, and not to be the victim, but this consciousness is perpetuated through our society. Like society is telling men this is what it means to be a man. Women are telling men, oh, I don't want an asshole and these things. And it's like, of course you don't want an asshole. But women don't always mean what they say. They're emotional based creatures. And what I've learned about women and what I've learned about myself is that as men, you have to be capable to be an asshole. That doesn't mean you have to be an asshole. That
Hmm.
just means you have to be capable of being an asshole. Now, what does being an asshole mean? To most people, because our culture's so soft, an asshole is simply a guy who can set a boundary and enforce it.
Mm.
Most guys have no backbone, they have no center, so they don't know how to enforce a boundary. So when they start doing it to the people in their life, everybody in their life never has seen them in this light. So all of a sudden they feel like they're being mean, but they're really not. They're just enforcing a boundary as a man knows how to do and saying, hey, this is my boundary. If you cross this, this is done, or this is not going to work. And nice guys, it's almost like this weird, it's like a syndrome. And they have all these problems with enforcing their assertiveness, with even like raising their voice or having a temper or showing any ounce of unconsciousness or toxic masculinity because they're so deathly afraid of the stereotypes that our society gives us. And for me, I had to learn, oh, no, I don't need to be nice. I need to be good. And being good is very different. Being a good man means you're going to stand up for what you believe in. If that means the weapon of choice is to fight,
Hmm.
is to enforce, is
Hmm.
to say no.
Right.
And that took a lot of pain, man.
Yes.
It took a lot of losses with women. It took a lot of being taken advantage of by men in my industry that I'm a part of because I was just naive to the realities of life. And
Right.
I think as men, I think like a staple of what it means to be a human is to be as innocent as a dove, but to be as wise as serpents. And that's a quote from the Bible. And what it's alluding to is that this world has evil. And to be able to fight evil, to be able to combat and protect yourself, to be a provider, like you have to be able to stand up against evil. And that's where the serpent comes in. You have to be wise, like the darkness. But the dove is the innocence, and the innocence is our heart, it's our soul. But to protect that innocence, you need boundaries. But to enforce boundaries, you have to act out of maybe what's so natural to you and be a little unnatural and use, like, play a game of chess almost, where you're putting on a mask, but the mask isn't to be fake, it's to protect yourself. And I always tell people I'd rather play the villain in somebody else's story before I lose my peace. And you arrive at that place after you've been taken advantage of for so long, and then you realize, oh, I've actually just neglected half of the human experience, and I haven't integrated that, quote, darkness into my own psyche. So it's becoming a shadow called a people pleaser, called a nice guy. And it's so destructive, man. It's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, these are topics that I never thought about, certainly prior to my awakening, and really hadn't dug into seriously until, a couple of years ago. And one thing that Jack Donovan says is there's a difference between being a good man and being good at being a man. And when I heard that, that was like a mini awakening for me. And it caused me to start thinking about, what does that really mean for me? And it's sort of like three-pronged. Number one, simply doing what you have to do, regardless of how you feel about it. I realized I'd been so caught up in my feelings, and I had kind of bought into that. Like, it's okay to be in your feelings and to show emotion, and that makes a true man. And to a degree, yes, like, men do need to feel comfortable sharing what they feel to an extent, but
100%.
in terms of going out into the world and building and taking and hunting, like, we need to collectively step up to a place where we do what we need to do, regardless of what's going on personally or emotionally in our lives, right? And I think in addition to that, it's just like being able to set boundaries, to your point, and not feel bad about it, and not think that it means that you're a bad person when you say what you need. This is part of being a sovereign man in today's crazy world, where the world increasingly needs men to step up and be that sword, because the world needs it, the world demands it. And then the third piece for me, man, is just like taking radical responsibility and owning everything that you create or that happens in your reality, even the things that seem like they may happen to you. That was a huge mind shift that for me was part of my inner child healing that I'm still working on, that I used to just feel that impulse to like want to push things away or make an excuse or not take ownership. But now it's like just taking radical ownership, and it actually feels so good because it gives you that control back, which I think a lot of men are lacking, right? They do not feel in control of their emotions, of their world, or of what they create. When you think about what being a good man means, or being good at being a man means for you, what are those things?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with everything you just said. I think the first and foremost is like, you can be emotional, but have your emotions in order, not out of control. A lot of men in our culture today are doing exactly what you said. And I did the same thing, where if I didn't feel like doing something, I wouldn't necessarily do it, because I justified it with, oh, like my energy's off today, so any of these actions are going to be fruitless because I'm not in a high frequency. It's like, yikes, that's a horrible road to go down. And yet millions of people believe in that statement. And those same men are the guys who get cheated on, the guys who never build a real business, the guys who are just soft kind of beta males, no offense, that they're not really emanating what it means to be a divine masculine. So for me, I see it as like a father. And when I say father, it's like that archetype is willing to do the hard things, even if it means like losing love from its child, but for the sake of the child learning. Like, that's what a father does. He's not there to be liked. He's not there to be anything other than protector, provider, and procreator, truly. And as men, we have to really, I think you said it great, like stand in our strength, stand in our truth, so that we can set the example for the world, because strong times create hard times create weak men. Weak men create bad times create strong men create good times. And we're in the period right now where, weak men have created really hard times, and we have to reclaim our strength. And that means doing the shit we don't feel like doing, moving through. Okay, great, I feel emotional, but guess what? The pilot or the plane is going down. I'm scared as shit, but I'm not going to just react. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to grab this steering wheel and land this thing to safety, because that's what a man does when everyone else is freaking out, when the world's freaking out, when everyone's saying, oh, stay in your house. It's like, no, that's not right. And I think as men, I think religion is making a really big comeback because it's so principle based in its thinking. And I think men are lacking that in their psyche. And in the masculine, we crave that structure. Men respond to structure. Look at the military. It's structure, it's order. You do hard tasks and you get rewarded. Men go to war for a freaking paycheck, but they will literally die for a ribbon, because this ribbon, this little piece of plastic, means something. Mm-hmm. And that's what the psyche of the man, like, we have to take that honor into our daily lives. Like, yeah, it doesn't mean we have to fight a real war in terms of going across seas, but guess what? Every single day there's a battle to be fought. Mm-hmm. And we're not doing it for ourselves. Like, this is when I have conversations with women. I was like, the reason men are so intense is because of women. We do everything for women. We want love. We want to provide. We want to protect. We want to give back to that feminine force that birthed us into this world. But we can't do that if we're all soft, or we're trying to be like women. If we're trying to, just go based off what we feel, if we're always trying to do what's easy or what feels good, it's actually quite the opposite. You got to do what doesn't feel good, what's super hard. And men respond so differently to trauma than women. Our competition, our hardship. Competition for men makes them rise. It makes them become better. Like, I train jujitsu, 4 or 5 days a week. I'm doing a competition in August, and I don't have to do the competition. I'm doing it because I want to push myself. I want to challenge myself. I want to see reality, because jujitsu and martial arts in general, you can't cheat. You are every day on the mats. I'm sobered with a harsh dose of reality, because you're not going to win by accident. You're going to win by skill, period. If you're gassing out and you're tired, you're going to lose. If you miss a lock when you had a moment, you might lose. And it's such a sobering, dose of reality, where it's like every moment you're confronting what sucks, but by fighting, by not giving up, by being strategic, by being smart, by using heart and strength and skill, you can overcome and win. Yeah. And as men, it's like we need to put ourselves in scenarios like that on a daily basis. And this correlates to the book, was like, when I realized, oh, I need an operator. I need to learn how to start thinking like a pure entrepreneur, or start thinking like a system-based person. Otherwise, I'm going to be a slave to my business. And I got into business for freedom, but I don't have freedom. So I need to be smart and do the shit I fucking hate, so that one day I can have freedom. And I took that route, and it fucking worked, man. And it was so hard, and it was so painful in a lot of ways, but it worked. And that translated over into my development as a man, as it has you. It's like, there is no victims around here. There's no excuses. Your life is where it is because of you. And when we accept that dose and we take that initiation, it allows us to go from boy to man. And that's an initiation, full-blown responsibility. It's so important.
Yep, I love that. I totally agree. I think, too, we're in a collective dark night of the soul right now as a collective, but also the male collective on the planet right now, and really, I think, rediscovering who we are. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, and there's always continual work to be done. For you, are there any areas that stick out where you see that men need to evolve, or even personally?
It's so interesting, because when I first joined jiu-jitsu, which was about 6 months ago, every single class, I'd get so angry. So for me, I'm just like a winner, man. Everything I do, I excel at. And that doesn't mean that happens overnight. It's just the way I do things. I'm a really slow learner. Yeah. But once I grasp, I excel. And I just was getting, and I think that my shit don't stink attitude that I kind of went into the gym with was not going to fly with my coaches. And they put me in such humbling scenarios day after day where I never won a round. Like, I just would get demolished the whole time. And I'd come home and I'd be so fucking angry. I'd just literally almost, like, I never felt that much anger. Like, a man just dominates you for an hour and a half. Like, it's very defeating. Yes. And I just felt so, like, mad. Like, I was mad at myself, because I'm like, I'm so fucking weak. Like, not only can I not accept the loss, I have this, like, cancer inside of me. It was like this victim mentality. It was so weird. It was like so confronting to my psyche, because I was like, there is nothing I can do to get better other than literally suffer. Like that was like the conclusion. And I was like, all right, you either go down this path, because I know how I am. I knew, like, if I'm doing this, I'm doing it. Like, I'm going to get good. I'm not just going to stay a white belt. Like, I'm going to commit myself to this, because that's just my personality. So there was like this moment where I was like, do I really want to do this? And I was like, yep. And what I realized about myself was that I didn't have any of my shadows integrated. If you watched me in my day-to-day life, you would think that back then, like, even rewind 8 months, you'd think I have everything under control. Like, don't get angry, don't get mad, like, successful. Yeah, underneath that, there was so much frustration. There was such a lack of my assertiveness developed. There was such a lack of my own strength developed. I was just weak, man. I wasn't capable of violence. And prior to this conversation, we kind of talked about 2022 for me. And everything in 2022 was symbolic of being a weak man. People I loved stole from me. They stole money from me. Like, people I paid tens of thousands of dollars a month to. Why did that happen? Is it because they were deliberately trying to hurt me and attack me? I don't think so. I think that happened because I was fucking naive. I had no boundaries with them. So they were boundless because I didn't have a boundary. So it was like my castle was open and there was gold laying around. And they took it. That's my fault, not theirs. Then I was attacked at one of my own seminars by a fucking woman, physically attacked.
Wow. Yeah.
For the throat, man. And I didn't know what to do. I literally went into shock. And I couldn't even finish the seminar. Dude, you know how humiliating that was? Like, I was at the peak moment. The seminar was ending. It was the last day, last session. It was just like this weird thing happened. And it was just like, then I got cheated on. All of this happened like within months of itself.
Wow.
And all of it was pointing to, dude, you're fucking weak. You are naive. Now, that doesn't mean like beat yourself up, but it means like, look in the mirror, dude. What are you doing wrong? There's something you're doing wrong. This isn't just God singling you out. There's a reason for this. And if you're not willing to see what you've done to make this happen, you are going to go down an ancestral pattern that is going to keep you a slave from your own evolution.
Yeah.
So it was just like this really deep, like, whoa, I need to really look at this. And that's part of what encouraged me to join a martial arts. And I started going, and I realized so many parts of my psyche were just undeveloped. I was a man, like, in terms of my age, but in my consciousness, I was a boy.
Right.
Because I was trying to hold on to lack of boundaries, a lack of assertiveness, being, wanting to not really have like real responsibility, not wanting to be the protector, not wanting to be the provider, wanting to kind of soak in the luxuries of life, because I did create financial abundance. But I realized all those things were keeping me in a very low state of consciousness in terms of a development as a man. So I started leaning a lot towards like principles and doing hard things and studying like war and manipulation and, Robert Greene, and learning about like the realities of life and the harshness of what's really happening in this world. And when I started doing that, everything changed. Like, I actually started gaining respect for myself for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Like, I was more excited to gain a stripe on my jiu-jitsu belt, which pretty much signifies you're getting better, than I am to make 100 extra grand. It's that meaningful, because it's just, there was something so lacking inside of me around the strength piece. And I realized this was some type of big like soul pattern I had to break. And now every day when I train and when I do these hard things, I don't look at it like, don't get me wrong, I have moments where this sucks, but for the most part, I embrace it. If I have a class where somebody dominates me, I say, you know what, Anton, all you have to do is not give up. And if you can do that, you're a good man. And when I go in with that mentality on the battlefield, it's incredibly empowering, because when that class ends, I know in my heart of hearts, not what my coaches think, not what my partners think, I know I gave it my best. Like, I truly left it all on the table. And I've seen that translate over into my business, into my relationships, where now it's like, kind of like I said about the presence thing. It's like when I'm with a girl, or I'm with my family even, like, I'm with my family. I'm not thinking about business. When I'm hanging out with my boys, I'm not thinking about business, although we usually talk about business. But there's a presence to me now where it's like that wasn't there before, and that's because I had like this Peter Pan energy, man. I was living in a false reality, and because of that, I wasn't able to create anything really real, and it was attracting very shallow relationships and no depth. And I think a lot of men, like I said, they're finding their way back to principle-based things like martial arts, like religion, like God. Like they're looking for order, they're looking for structure, because that's how men really operate.
I wasn't raised to be a man in the way that I think about what the concept means today. I wasn't raised soft, although as I matured and started to come into some consciousness, I felt soft. And there's so many parallels that I'm drawing between what you share, because I've experienced all of those things myself, and even recently. And I know something that you're really, really passionate about and big on as well is breath work. And I wanted to add in, for any guys watching this, in addition to combat or sports or some kind of competition, start getting into some sort of nervous system work where you can start to dispel that fight or flight, or if it comes up, you're better equipped to actually handle it. And then you can start to seek out more challenging, more difficult situations as you take yourself to your edge and just beyond. And as you continue to edge, you start to push who you are, and you start to increase your capability as a man, and you start to feel more able, and you start to feel stronger, and all of those things start to work together. And that's what I'm really working on now as I step into my next level.
Dude, that's spot on, man. Nervous system work is huge, and there's a lot of ways to do it. I think sports is really important, but you also and it depends on the sport, but most sports, as a byproduct of playing them, if you're doing it on a competitive level, like there's a byproduct of your mind grows as well. But the nervous system is really huge. Like I went through a ton of trauma when I was young, like emotional, physical abuse, these things. As I got older, like I went through a lot of emotional trauma with women cheating on me and things like this. Like I've been cheated on by 3 different girls. And it was just like, I'm a really big lover, like at the core of my being. Like I love people. I've always loved people. I've always been like, I've always been a lover. And I get that from my father. Like my dad is very, like the pictures I've had in my mind of my father, like of what the example of love is, has always been like very, very traditional. Like my dad would like write my mom handwritten cards and leave her flowers and like surprise her with a thing in her door. Like that was my dad, and that's what I modeled, and that's how I always showed up in all my relationships.
Right.
But with that, it almost became a sense of pleasing.
Yeah.
Where it was like there was no strength in that. Now, my dad didn't. I wouldn't say my dad was a pleaser. That was something that I just kind of developed on my own. And that was because of the lack of my masculinity developed. Like there's 2 sides of the masculine. There's the light and the dark. The light is that lover, that kindness, that beauty, that nobleness, that faith, that heart-centeredness. But then there's the dark side. And the dark side is like that grounded, raw, primal strength. Yeah, exactly. Like that part that will rip a building open if something's attacking those that it loves. But so many men, they become spiritual, they get into their hearts. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But then they don't have the dark side developed, man. And when I say dark, it's not evil, but it's that rebellious nature, that kind of badass that lives life on his own terms. Like if you've seen the movie Fight Club, like Tyler Durden, he's all dark, Now, overly dark, you're getting into toxic masculinity. Now you're getting into unhealthy, you're getting into a wounded form of the masculine where you're an abuser, you're a criminal, you're a rapist, you're a murderer. But at the same time, you need to develop that side of you in some capacity, because this is what separates a man from a woman. And without that piece, your psyche is not fully developed as a man. So I love what you're saying about the nervous system work, because in those edges, you dissolve them. Like you think it's your edge, it's really not. Right. Like, and I love the ice bath to do that.
Right.
Because what I noticed when I started doing the ice bath from the beginning of this year, every single morning, I've woken up and jumped right in. That's been my daily thing, even on weekends since the 1st of this year, and I haven't missed a day. And every day I noticed, and it progressively got better over time, but your nervous system, like it goes under such a state of shock. And there's almost like this really deep reset that I feel takes place when I take a hold of my breath and I command to my body that it's safe. That although this water's fucking 40 degrees, but I'm safe. And that resets my nervous system, because I've always kind of been a little skittish Like I've always struggled with anxiety,
Yeah.
or depression. I have some PTSD that I still work through, and I have to be very cognizant of that practice. And it's not because I'm wounded or something's wrong with me, but every man has anxiety. Every man has some form of, hardships in their past that form their personality. So you can call it whatever you want, but there's been shit every guy has been through, whether it's a heartbreak, whether it's, they got hit by their dad or whatever it might have been. There's shit that has made us who we are, and that's affecting our biology. So what I found is by putting myself into situations where I feel like I'm suffocating or like I'm dying, and I can calm down into those, dude, it really changes you. Like when you're getting choked in jujitsu and you're looking at the clock and you're like, fuck, I'm getting choked. I'm not like to the point where the blood's stopping fully, but I'm almost there. And I'm looking at the clock and it's 3 minutes and I have a split decision to make. Do I sit in this discomfort and try to fight?
Yeah.
Or do I give up and tap? And it's like my nervous system always, the first response is give up. Just give up. But then like there's something that clicks in me where I say, no, I got to stay here because this is the whole point of life. How, like, what did Christ do, man? He suffered. Like that's what Jesus did. Like I'm not like a super hardcore Christian, but that is a symbol of what it means to be a man. Like the Buddhists say it, life is suffering. Now, there is a moment where suffering doesn't become suffering anymore. And it's like the David Goggins mentality of like, no, I actually love this. Like this pain sucks, but I'm going to sit in this ice bath. I'm going to stay in this choke and fight it. And sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. But either way, you figure out who you are. And I think men need to I love what you said about going to the edge, because that is what it means to be a man. You have to go to your edge. What is your full-blown capacity? How hard can you work? How early can you wake up? How late can you stay up? How little amount of sleep can you get and function optimally? Well, you're never going to learn these things if you don't push yourself. You will not learn what you're made of. And I don't know if you've ever read any Marcus Aurelius, but he talks a lot about this. This guy, he had the world at his fingertips. He was the greatest emperor in the world. He had it all. And yet he still chose being a principle-driven good man over just like letting life kind of revolve around him.
Taking advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. He embraced it all and constantly challenged his own psyche to become better. And I think that's what every man needs. And we need each other, man. Like there's so much, it breaks my heart. There's so much polarization across genders, across politics, across countries. It's so painful, man. It doesn't have to be this way, but it's going to take a bit of out of balanceness to occur for the tides to readjust. And I think that fight, so to say, is really led by strong men who aren't afraid to speak what they believe.
Anton, it's been such a joy to watch your journey up to this point. I am continually humbled to be connected, to be a friend, to learn from you. And before we jump off, man, is there anything I did not ask you or anything you want to leave our listeners with that we didn't yet cover today?
Well, first of all, brother, thank you. I always love having these conversations with you, and it's been an honor to see you grow as well. And I think growth isn't necessarily measured by accomplishments, but by maturity. To be honest, I think that's a really good metric of growth: is how much are we maturing? How much are we facing the realities of the world, and as a byproduct, growing what we can, whether it's the business, whether it's our career, whether it's our relationships, whether it's our finances. So it's always a pleasure, man. And I think for everybody listening, don't settle. I think so many people settle for what life gives them. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we are creators, but it's not a passive creator. It's an active creator where we need to go into the world and with our actions, create new things. If you don't like something, change it. If you don't like your health, change it. You don't like a relationship, change it. Don't like your business, change it. Don't like your career, change it. Like we have that power. And every day, we really have to see, what are we made of? Most people, they never really learn who they are because they choose pleasure over discomfort, and they distract themselves with pleasure instead of trying to make something of themselves. Like I am right now in the process of like really eliminating social media. Like I use social media a lot. I like social media, but at the same time, I'm working on building the habit of, instead of grabbing my phone, I'm going to grab a book. Instead of scrolling for 10 minutes, I'm going to read Meditations from Marcus Aurelius for 10 minutes.
Definitely.
And when you can do these little things, it can really just compound over your life.
Yeah. Damn, brother, this has been such an amazing conversation. We will include all of your links below. So guys, be sure to check those out, including Anton's brand new book, CEO², and how to become the person that you need to become to do that. Bro, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for this conversation.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you.